Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host David Grijalva from CIV Robotics. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mayar.
David, take us back to your teenage days till this date. What would be your career highlights?
Yeah, a lot of career highlights. I've been in the space for over 10 plus years. Grew up a huge nerd and geek of robots here at an early young age. Just always dreamed about working with robots. Always thought it was sci-fi. And something that, never would happen. And here we are, fast forward, 20 plus years now, and been pretty honored to have worked in this space and have worked with some of the largest forward-thinking construction companies out there pushing for the innovation of new technology and seeing the wave of early adoption to mid-adopt to now kind of we're at the late stage of adoptions of robots. And it's been remarkable, seeing something that is a prototype come to reality, and then you see full scale fleets of operations of these robots just going out. It's super, super awesome.
And if you were to look 5 years ago, what was one thing that you overestimated and underestimated in terms of progress of robotics in our industry?
Great question. 5 years ago, I underestimated how quickly the industry would adopt, right? Construction is very slow moving, especially with new technology. You always have the West Coast always early adopters in everything that comes out. And then as you start to move across the states and different regions, right, you start to think, how quickly can they catch on? Right. And 5 years ago, I thought it'd be very, very slow moving because that's what construction is, right? Everything's slow moving. But over the last few years, it's been so quick and fast paced that, it's hard to do a project if you're not using some type of automation or robotics of, that means of methods of completing a project, because owners today know that there's robots, and a project they had you build 5 years ago that took 18 months. They now want that same building built this year in 12 months, or even better, they wanted it built yesterday. So it's great to see how quickly this moved throughout the space and the industry so fast. I thought it would take a couple more years, probably 10, but here we are 5 years later, and it's catched on.
Yeah, and also the advancement with ChatGPT and LLM, it totally changed the whole landscape.
It did. The majority of people that reach out to me now, or that come through to my company, they say, hey, I use ChatGPT and it recommended your company. So it's great because we have the older people that are getting used to new technology and Googling. Now they're going into ChatGPT and saying, hey, I'm looking to do this. What can help me with this? And now it's giving recommendations to robotic companies.
It's so interesting. Who would you give a shout out to? Any mentors in your career who made a big impact?
Yeah, I would say there's two people that I met early on in my robotics career. There was a gentleman named Richard Walker who brought me into the robotics space early on and gave me the opportunity to kind of just dive into this world of robotics. He was really great at kind of walking me through a lot of the ups and downs of the robotics space of, where do we see the need for this, and where are some of our struggles, and where do we need to be better at in terms of overall deployment and adoption. He led the customer success team at my first robotics company and was really the pioneer of driving forward utilization and adoption of our robots at the time, and gave me a lot of great advice on how to maneuver through certain deals and certain contracts to be able to get things through the funnel. And then another gentleman by the name of Jeff Perry, who he was a third generation carpenter, been in the space. His dad had been in the space. His dad even owned a construction company. And he was one of the first salesperson at my first robotics company. And he understood construction from at an early age. So he could talk the talk. And he really taught me what it was to essentially be that foreman and that carpenter. He gave me how-to lessons as to why does this matter? Why does this wall need to be straight? Why does it need to be lined up to the mullion here and all this stuff? And it made me appreciate what it is to be in construction, along with construction robotics, because, it's one thing to sell a robot to somebody that's going to use it, but if you don't understand how or what or why they're going to use it, then it's never going to matter to that person. So I had to put my hard hat on and, learn how to make a 3, 4, 5 triangle, understand control points to the T where I could talk that talk with other people and collaborate more with the construction companies and the end user, which was extremely impactful. And ever since my first robotics company, I've had the pleasure of working with those two gentlemen and other robotics companies because have brought them along with me to the journeys of saying, hey, I can't do this without you, Jeff, or I can't do this without you, Richard. You guys have taught me so much in this space. I always have to keep learning from you guys.
It's a power combo making like a killer sales team.
It is, right? Construction is very tight knit, and even in the robotic technology space, it's very tight knit. So it really comes down to, who and who you can trust, right? Because once you build those relationships and connections, it's something that's always going to stay with you forever. And how do you continue to foster and grow those and be able to build off that success has always been very impactful for me, and it has helped my career along the way here.
I was wondering if you can walk us through how a day in your life looks like at the company and a week in your life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I oversee sales here for North America for CIV Robotics. A lot of my day to day is a little bit, I would say, trying to be structured, but not as much, because in construction, you got to be flexible and be able to bob and weave with what comes at you. So as much as I like to try to stay to a calendar, there's a lot of curveballs that get thrown on at you, right? And there's last minute calls you have to jump on, or last minute meetings that you have to go through in terms of, hey, here's a feedback call, or here's kind of the adoption progress of where we're at and what's not working for us. But most of my days spent, working with my sales team here, my SDR team, making sure that we are hitting the metrics that we need to do. Ensuring that we're aligned with who we're going to reach out to in projects, and ensuring that we have everything that we need to be successful to go out and make a positive connection with somebody or within the space. The week after that is typically, a lot of times I'm traveling. I always like to tell people my work from home is either on an airplane or at a hotel because I'm constantly out there. I'm very old school in my ways of sales, and it matches very well with construction. I like to meet people where they're at. I like to shake their hand. I like to really put that face to name here and say, hey, I'm the guy, or my team's the one that's been reaching out to you. I'm in the area. I'd love to kind of just drop in and say hello and see if we can have a quick discussion or just chit chat. Just, how are you doing? Love to set something up when I get back. And so this year's been pretty busy. I would say I've flown over 40 plus times this year and stayed in over
Whoa.
80 plus nights at the Marriott. So status is great.
Almost like once per week, like 40.
Yep. There was a time where I was literally gone every single week, just on a plane, just out and about.
And if you were to share brief about CIV Robotics, what kind of project it helps, at what stage one should contact?
Yeah. So at CIV, we're deploying a robot that's doing essentially layout for foundational or for solar farms. So really before any slab gets down on the ground itself. Where we're seeing a lot of our success and a lot of our wins right now are in large scale solar farms, wide open field where the robot can go and lay down markings of where they're going to drop a pile for install here on the solar farms. Not only with CIV, but any robotics company that's going to be doing some type of automation in terms of layout, it's always important to start thinking about that or looking into that 3 months prior to any type of kickoff going on. When you start to go through the pre-con side and estimating side of what you're going to need to actually complete a project, the one big thing that's going to come up is schedules, right? Labor costs. And if you're dealing in one of these, high scale projects or mission critical projects, the one thing that's always going to be talked about is how can we complete this project quicker, or how can we get done with a certain part of our schedule faster so that we have a buffer for other things, right? We all know in construction, nothing's ever modeled or built 100%. There's going to be some type of errors or some type of change order or rework that's going to happen. But if you're able to catch it sooner or add for some buffer on the schedule for that, that helps with the completion of that project, because you're not then going into the time it takes to complete that. You're actually still on par with schedule. You don't have to worry about crewing up or paying additional overtime. So a lot of times my team and myself are speaking with these companies right before they're about to put that shovel in the ground. And we're understanding, how quickly do you do this project? Okay, great. It's 18 months. How much time do you have for this specific scope of layout? What's your total budget for that right now? And what if we can half that budget and half your schedule on that? what would that do for you in terms of completing this project, under time and even under budget? Probably going to get the next project from this owner if you do so.
For a founder in robotics listening to this, how do they plan a sales org structure? So I was reading this book from Winning by Design, and they were recommending a structure where, okay, first million are 10 to 30 clients, founder does the outreach, founder does the closing, and then they hire a SDR and founder does the account executive work. And then you become like a pod structure with customer success manager. So that's for general B2B SaaS, but for robotics, it might be different and the sales cycle and everything. So if you can give us a master class on thinking about robotic sales or planning.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no perfect formula, right? What I've seen that's worked very successful in this space is that founder is going to be the one that leads the first million to 2 million, right, in revenue. And then at that point, right, you want to start looking at adding on a account executive, right? That first true sales hire that's going to work in tandem with that CEO and still going out there doing kind of full cycle, right? Going after new business, expecting closing business, nurturing those accounts. Because at that point, you probably have a handful of accounts, maybe no more than 10. Once you've started to build out a playbook of who are the right people to be speaking to, where are we seeing our wins, where are we seeing some of our losses, then you can be a little bit more strategic as to here's a basic guideline that we can have an SDR follow. We've understand our ICP. We understand a couple of areas in which we can attack. Now we can kind of start to look to hire our first SDR and say, hey, here's a list of 20 accounts that are similar to the 10 accounts we currently work with. And here's a list of titles that we've worked with to actually secure the contracts. So now go out and outbound to these people. After that, right, as soon as you're in double digits of revenue, typically close to 10 mil, is when you want to start to say, hey, this is scalable. Let's start adding some more gasoline to the fire here. Let's start to grow out the SDR team. Let's add another salesperson potentially. And then let's start to look for some type of account management, right? Because once you start to hit double digits in revenue, you don't want that AE focusing on both new and existing business. You kind of want to split the two because you're going to want the AE to go and bring in net new logos to be more attractive to those investors, as well as having an account management or customer success managing the back end of growing and penetrating through those accounts. Now, construction is very unique because they're very decentralized. One big construction company could have 10 different business units. And so it's how do you structure that? And how do you have a plan of attack to grow and penetrate through the account? And a lot of times what I've seen is new business units within a large org are typically net new logos for that AE. And when those new business units come on, those then go over to the customer success team to manage. But you're always working together with that customer success team, with the AE to still kind of move upwards to the account. And at that point, if you're able to penetrate enough business units and you're able to grow within those business units, at that point, by the time you get to the corporate level of an account, you're now talking enterprise level agreements nationwide for adoption. That can be as quickly as 9 months, and it could be as long as 2 years. And so I've seen really good rollouts and really good team efforts to grow accounts like that, where some of your top accounts are now responsible for 2 to 4 million of your annual recurring revenue every single year, because you've now have fully adopted within the organization from an enterprise level. And it started with that one AE just bringing on business units, and then you have someone back there just nurturing that through.
This is such a gem of a knowledge. I find this kind of stuff missing and largely talked about because now 9 months to 2 years, that's the patience game for a enterprise and big
Yeah,
account value.
it's a lot of having little wins to just go and show that, hey, your region in the West Coast and your region in the Midwest and your region in the Southeast are all using us. Why is there not something that is set in stone from a corporate level and then pushed down? Everybody in construction wants the best deal, and they all want to piggyback off of some type of agreement. So we know you're not streamlined today, but how do we get you guys streamlined in terms of adoption? Because this can benefit everybody from a pricing standpoint. And then that becomes a lot more attractive to these large scale construction companies, where they say, okay, if we already have all these small wins and we've been deployed on 20 projects, this probably warrants a higher level look into it. And maybe we should ink something at the corporate level.
Can you talk a bit about the channel that works in construction, or like especially robotics-led sales outreach? Is it like LinkedIn, cold email, cold calling, in-person events?
Yeah, it's a mix, right? And funny enough, I was just interviewing somebody today, and we were talking about, what's your current, what's your sales process? Because your typical SaaS model is not going to work for construction. The days of spraying and praying, making 100 dials is not going to lead you to anything in construction. What I've seen work really best is, you're going to have a very targeted approach. You need to know who you're calling and why you're calling and the intent behind it, because you're lucky if you get 30 seconds with a project manager or a director of technology, right? They're so busy, they have so much going on, and you have to figure out, why would you be taking my call and what's important to you so that I can get my point across. And what I've seen work really best or really good lately is you have your typical cadence of your calls, your emails, your LinkedIn outreaches, but at the end of the day, what's going to make you stand out from everybody else in their inbox is how personal are you willing to get with them. And one of the things I've always looked for, and I've always had this question with everybody I interviewed as SDRs and salespeople is how would you penetrate an account to a construction company who's been in business for 100+ years that has no social media presence, no LinkedIn at all? How would you get there? And it's super simple, handwritten note of saying, hey, I've been reaching out to you, want to give you a few minutes. Hopefully you can give me a few minutes of your time. It's so small, but no one does it today. No one's writing handwritten notes. And it was something that I pushed a lot with my team, is saying, hey, every Friday, have a list of 5 accounts that you've been wanting to get into, that you've been hitting your head, and that you have been getting no luck, and you're probably blocked as spam. So let's take the time, a few minutes, write them a handwritten note, and we're going to send it out Friday. And by Tuesday, it's going to land on their desk, and you're going to be giving them a call. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get that person to pick up and say, hey, I got your handwritten note. Thank you so much. I'm not the right person to speak with, which is great to hear as a salesperson. Or no, we're not interested. Great. Can you tell me a little bit more so I can add notes here, right? But it's always served me pretty well, because in the age of everything being AI, ChatGPT, well, you can't use ChatGPT to handwrite your note. That is definitely always going to stand out for these construction companies. And the amount of people that would just call me and say, wow, I haven't received a handwritten note since I was a kid, right? Because no one does it. And it's that wow factor in sales. If you can wow somebody, right, they're going to give you the time. Or if you can wow them in whatever stage that you're in with them, right, they're going to listen to what you have to say. And that's where I always tell my team is like, how do we get to wow our prospects? Because wowing them is going to open that door for us to meet with them. And they're going to have their guard dropped just a little bit when it comes to them meeting me.
It's such a great advice. And I want to get a bit tactical. So when you say handwritten notes, the account executive has done the research about the prospect. They are resonating the points and how the product can offer value. And are they sending like these cards to the office, mailing them, or are they taking photos, emails? Hey, look what like. What's the implementation looks like?
Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, the handwritten note's something super, super short. It could just be like, hey, I've been giving you a call for the last few weeks. Don't know if it got lost. Hopefully you're doing okay. Looking forward to speaking with you on this day. Sometimes I would send handwritten notes with a case study and just say, hey, TLDR, here's some bullet points. Want to talk about this with you on Wednesday. I'll give you a call at this time. Other times you send holiday cards, right? You're just like, hey, I hope you have a great holiday. You might be too busy, but looking forward to catching up with you when you get back. They can be very, very personal, or they can be very, very direct with the intent as to why you're sending the note. Both work pretty well. And that can be done at the AE level, or it can be done at the SDR level, right? But you have to know that this letter that you're writing is going to the person that I need to meet with, that I know is going to hold budget, and that I know is going to make the decision of yes or no. You don't want to be sending these out to someone who is an influencer, right? Because a little bit of time wasted for not getting the same output. I want to go attack that top dog, or that main decision maker, because that's the person that I need to be speaking with. And my time is better spent that direction than downward.
And I've seen some LinkedIn stories where sometimes people send champagne or like hoodie or cap. I
Mhm.
haven't heard those kind of in construction sales outreach.
Yeah, those are great, right? Drops. We've all done drops as salespeople. I do them today when I'm in territory. I'll go knock on a trailer or go to an office. A lot of times, right, you always want to come bearing a gift, right? It sucks to come empty-handed and you say, "Hey, I just want to meet somebody. I want to interrupt their day." Well, no, get out of our office. We're calling security. That's happened to me before. But if you come with, "Hey, I'm just in the area, wanted to stop by, put a name to face," that's it. Shake your hand if you're available. If not, here's some cookies or
Yeah.
here's a bottle, happy holidays, right? And then quickly follow up with an email or even write a handwritten note there. Just like, "Hey, stopped in the office, may have missed you. Look out for an email from me later today." Send them an email and say, "Hey, hope you enjoy whatever I dropped. Love to grab some time when you're available next week." All right. I always tell people if someone's a really nice person, they're going to at least say thank you. If they are not a nice person or maybe they're just having a bad day, you may not get anything, right? But also being very strategic with your drops. I always like to, when I go into an area or a new territory, I like to get something that's local to that area and not something that, they can go and get like randomly, like a bottle of wine. You can always give a bottle of wine, but if there's a local, um, market or a local bakery that you can get some cookies from that everybody knows, right, then that's better to drop off. Or let's say you've made a good relationship with the gatekeeper or their secretary and they tell you, like, "Oh, so-and-so loves crumble cookies," or whatever, right?
Mm.
Use that, right? That's all good information, and use it to your advantage when you're in the area.
David, how should one plan about quarterly goals planning for the sales team? If how many accounts SDR should outreach? What's an ideal weekly or monthly meetings goal?
Yeah. I mean, it's all going to structure from what the yearly goal is, right? And you break down from your yearly to quarterly to monthly and then weekly and daily. And so the goal that we typically have set here for the sales team right now is that, each SDR is targeted to do close to about 100 touches a day. And with those 100 touches a day, we're hoping to see them garnish about 3 to 4 meetings. Now, when we start looking at a close percentage, depending on how good the sales team is good at closing, right? If you have the SDRs performing at 3 meetings a piece, which is going to give close to 12 opportunities for that AE, you're looking to see at least, potentially 3, if not 4 of those meetings actually close, right? That's a perfect world. To get there is a lot harder, right? Because you have to, one, make sure you're well structured in who you're outbounding to. Two, you have to really ensure that the SDRs are good at qualifying. So they're not putting, trash in, because trash in is trash out. And then the other thing is you have to make sure that when you book those meetings as an SDR, right, those people are showing up. And one of the things that we're looking to solve here currently is no-show rates, right? Is SDRs are really good at booking meetings right now, and they're good at booking at the right people and qualifying. But now it's getting those people to actually show up. And that's always going to be kind of a challenge in construction, because taking a sales call versus having a P0 happen on the job site, that's always going to take precedence or priority over, that. And so, we try to add a little bit of a buffer there of saying, okay, if we're seeing close to a 5% no-show rate, now we have to start structuring, maybe booking additional meeting each week so that we can buffer in for that no-show rate. And then diving into, okay, how many meetings are actually being qualified as an opportunity, and what is that AE doing to move it through the pipeline itself? The golden number that I've always seen is 20 open opportunities is going to lead to about roughly throughout the year. If you have a pipeline of 20 open opportunities, you're going to see close to about 12 to 11 actual deals closed out of that. 20 has kind of always been the sweet spot. When you start to go over 20 opportunities, it becomes a little bit tougher for an AE to manage, especially with, a lot of moving parts. So I kind of always want to make sure that we're not under 20, we're at 20. And if it's okay if we're a little bit over 20, but once you get to 30, 40, it becomes kind of an unrealistic expectation.
Wasn't aware about this number. This is like very great benchmarking metric, I guess, like because then you can also know if your team is overburdened or underutilized.
Yeah, yeah. The one thing you want the team to understand is you only want real deals in the pipeline, right? And defining what that criteria is, right? A real deal can be, with a decision maker, and with a project that's going to start in the next 3 months, right? We don't want deals that are going to be starting in the next 4 to 6 months, right? We're very precise. And this is the sweet spot where we need to be talking to these people because we're at the right moment to be put into that budget or to start talking with the project teams. And so that's kind of what we look for there. If it's outside of that kind of metric, we don't even want it in the pipeline because 4+ months out, a lot of things can change. And then it throws off then your forecasting.
From my experience, I also feel like finding good talent in sales for construction tech is also difficult. So if you can share like what has been your experience and how you used to do hiring before and what's changed now.
Yeah, it's still tough to say. You want to look for somebody who is excited about the space, and that could be excited about construction, that could be excited about technology. Um, it could be about robots, but it is pretty tough, right? There's not a lot of people that are doing robotic sales. There are good people that do hardware sales, but it doesn't always translate very well into construction. What I've always seen some of the best people that I've either worked with or have hired are people that have come from construction who understand what it's like to live the day to day or have seen firsthand the issues that our technology or robots looking to solve, right? Because they can speak to that pain so much more. And those have always been the best people to bring on and hire. And then at that point, you're just training them on how to um, you know, kind of sell a premium product to a blue collar space, right? And understanding that they need to know how to have conversations at a C suite, as well as still being able to talk to the lower level at a field level, right? And be able to navigate through those conversations, or as I call it, just bobbing and weaving and matching who you're speaking with. And that's on the sales front. From an SDR area, that's also pretty challenging because you want somebody who is okay with being uncomfortable in a space that they don't know and willing to not follow the norm of what they've learned, because a lot of SDRs are coming from SaaS, and your SaaS playbook is not going to work in construction playbook. And that's the first thing that we tell them. And it's, are you willing to unlearn everything you've learned and learn something new? Or are you going to default to your old ways because you're comfortable with that? I want to see someone who's uncomfortable and who's willing to ask the questions on the phone as to, hey, I don't know what that means. Can you tell me more? And a lot of SDRs aren't willing to do that because they're just focused on booking me, booking me, booking me, but never ask additional questions. And so, the one thing that I always look for from an SDR is, are you flexible? Can you bob and weave? And are you curious enough? And then from an AE standpoint, it's, have you done something manual? Have you done something hard in your life? What did that feel like? And what if someone was able to automate that for you? How much better would that have made your life? Take that same feeling and project it in your calls, right? Because those people are going to relate to you so much more if you understand the backbreaking world of whatever you've done and try to relate it to them. And that's going to go further than you just trying to sell $100,000 or $200,000 piece of equipment just because you need to make commission or money.
You're giving mindset advice to, I love it. So it looks like the account executive or sales, it's often better to have someone from the construction who knows nuances and they can learn sales. But for
Mhm.
SDR from B2B SaaS, but they are willing to adopt construction and learn. It's an interesting mix of.
Yeah. I mean, some of my best SDRs came from SaaS, but they were willing to just say, let's start fresh as if I'm a new SDR. That's like, great, you're coachable. Let's do this. And let's go do something amazing. And sales at the end of the day, right? It's a skill everybody can learn, right? So we have no problem teaching you the skill. It's the will, right? And the want to do it. And a lot of times when someone comes from a blue collar job, right, they're not afraid of rolling up their sleeves and getting dirty, right? They're willing to put in the time and the work. And those are ones that we've always seen have been really, really successful in the space.
Uh, how should a founder plan about uh, the salary for the sales team? I know like there is like fixed component and on target earning when they are hiring a SDR or the sales manager. What's the typical salary? And how much they are expected to produce revenue. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's all going to come down to, are you looking to hire for people in office or remote, right? Because if you do remote, you can play a little bit with the pay. If you want people in office, right, you're going to need to probably pay what the current rate is. A lot of times we want to be on par with what the market is going for. Going back and forth with negotiations just is playing too many games, right? And if you really want somebody who's good, you better offer them the fair market value. Otherwise, someone else is going to swoop that person up. For SDRs, you're going to want some type of structure around for meetings booked or meetings qualified, and then potentially a percent off of that meeting booked if it goes to close, right? Give them some type of percent of a kickback. So at CIV here, we structured the SDRs to have a salary that's in line with what the market's going for here for San Francisco, but we're also paying them for every qualified meeting that gets booked that the AE says, yes, this is qualified. And then if that AE then takes it to close, that SDR who booked that initial meeting for that qualified meeting is going to get a 1% kickback off of that total contract value. So that incentivizes your SDRs to not just book random meetings and waste your AE's time, but they're more strategic because they know that they're going to get a piece of the pie. And that motivates them a little bit more to make those hard calls for a title that they would probably feel very uncomfortable making, but they know if I book a meeting with this senior vice president and it closes, I may get a 1% off of that contract value. Why not? Right. And then on the AE side again, right, it's making sure you're matching what the current salary is for AEs, understanding that it's getting harder and harder to find really good talent in the space, but let alone in the robotic space, right? There's very few AEs out there that have been doing this for some time. And, you want to pay for the experience and you want to pay for the connections they may have that they can kind of help bring into your org. But, from there, you do want to pay them a decent salary that they can live off of, along with a nice cushion for commission as well. And whether that commission is paid monthly or quarterly with some incentives for accelerators and stuff. But, in this space, I've seen AEs, from a total of an OTE get close to 300K. I've seen some top AEs get close to 500K with 80% of that coming straight from commission. The growth and earning potential is really high when you get to an AE position in this robotic space, because you're dealing with, 6 to 7 figure deal contracts that, an AE is taking home, max that I've seen 10%, as low as about 6%.
and customer success also have percentage on renewal.
Some organizations will have the customer success team own renewals or expansions. A lot of times they will be, they have a little bit of a higher base from a cushion standpoint, but a lesser cut of commission. Normally they're getting, anywhere between like a 1% to 2% kickback if they keep that current customer happy or even grow. A lot of times you want to structure your customer success team as not so much as a sales team, but more as that expert team where your accounts feel comfortable calling them for anything and everything, and kind of just let the sales be handled with the AE, right? There's orgs where I've worked in where the AE and customer success work together. The customer success manager will always funnel opportunities up to the AE for the AE to close, whether it's an upsell or some type of renewal discussion. And then on that customer success is going to get a kickback from that as well. So in that world, right, you still position your success team as the experts, and you leave your salesperson to do what they're good at, which is just closing business, right? Or asking for the sale.
Is it possible to share like a range? Because right now, like SDR in Midwest would be like way different salary than SDR in California. So I'm just thinking like how much fixed cost it is. Is it 250 grand a year or 500 grand to get a SDR, AE, and the manager?
I mean, if you're looking to hire an SDR and an AE, right, there's two things you have to look for. Do I want an experienced SDR to complement an experienced AE, or do I just want an experienced AE with a less seasoned or maybe a fresh person out of college SDR, right? I would always go for the higher end of You bring in a seasoned AE, you bring in a seasoned SDR, you let them work together, and you're probably going to, from a salary standpoint, between those two, you're probably going to pay combined, under potentially 300K in just salary for those two people. But they're going to have the expectation that, hey, this season SDR, you're building a pipeline for this AE. Season AE, we're expecting you, if we promised double-digit growth this year, we're expecting you to hold about 80% of that as a pipeline, if not triple that, because we expect you to close, 2 or 3 million in just revenue. And a lot of times I've seen AEs that have been able to do that. The really good ones will find a way to always exceed that. And they get very creative in how they exceed their quotas. It's one of those things where founders have to really have that discussion is, am I willing to shell out money for top talent now? Or do I just wait and go with mid-level talent and then hopefully get to a point where I can bring in seasoned talent? If you start with the best talent to go with, well, your company's going to start to take off pretty quickly. If you start slow, well, you're going to slowly start to get there. So it's just kind of one of those things. Do I rip the Band-Aid off now or do I rip it off later?
Yeah, like it's also tough for founders because they have limited resources. But it looks like, let's say, for that 300K combo where they have 20 opportunities, and if they close 11, if we just take a conservative estimate of 6 figures, okay, so that combo can close up to 2 million additional revenue, or maybe from 1 to 2 million. It's a good ROI, like if it works well. But what if 1 month in, 3 months in, you're like, okay, it's not working. You spend it 50 grand or 80 grand and they're not able to close.
Yeah. I mean, there is always a ramp period, right? There's, I've seen as short as 3 months and I've seen as long as 6 months. The ramp depends on, do you have a current pipeline or do you not, right? If you have a current active pipeline and if you have some type of marketing campaign to garnish, some inbounds, a 3-month ramp should be fine, right? To see if that AE is going to be able to maneuver and grow. If you don't have anything built out, right, and let's say you're working off spreadsheets and Excel and you have no type of CRM and no type of tracking, you're going to need to give the AE the benefit of the doubt and give them 6 months to ramp, right? Because that AE is going to have to go figure out how they're going to understand their territory, how they're going to build their pipe, how they're going to track and manage that, and start to bring some tools to the leadership team as to what they need to just be successful from a baseline, right? And that's one thing that founders need to be open to is, what tools do my sales team need to be successful at just the bare minimum, right? How do we build that foundation so that if we bring in somebody else, right, they have those tools at their disposal ready to use? And that's always, from what I've seen, is an interesting conversation to have with the founder. I've had that a few times of like, hey, we can keep doing the status quo as we are today and we can be at X. But if we invest in a CRM or invest in some type of recording or some way of garnishing additional contact information, right, we can see this, right? And yes, you're going to pay for a sales tech stack of a basic tech stack, probably an additional okay, but it's going to garnish, X that in potential revenue for you. And some of the best tech stacks I've seen out there is if you add Gong with Zoom Info and then you baseline HubSpot, that's all you really need to get going. LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that's nothing too expensive, but those basic tech stacks can help throw a lot of gasoline on the fire and just have your company take off.
This is really, I wasn't imagining sales could go up to 100K, the tech stack. So I see HubSpot CRM, and then Zoom Info for data enrichment, emails, phone number, and then Gong for analysis. So it becomes like a feedback loop.
Yeah. Gong's really great at like recording calls, but they also give a lot of analytics into, intent or objections that come up. They're really good at automating some of the back end of drip campaigns. And then, you add Zoom Info there, which is kind of the premium product out there in the market, but they've been the biggest player in the space since I've used them, to enrich contacts and get the additional information and also pull intent signals, right? Week and daily, I get a report from ZoomInfo of some of my top accounts that here are their intent to buy if they're looking at new technology or they've added people they're looking to hire, right? All those intent signals are great to understand where this org is trying or looking to make, purchasing decisions. And maybe is it the right time to get in there? And so, you know, those companies have always been the leaders in the space, even though there's a lot of lower end companies. I've tried them all. But at the end of the day, right, you get what you pay for. And you rather go with the leaders in the space than the small fish in the space that have a lot of bugs and issues.
I have so many questions on like how do you know when to fire or in terms of like how many interviews for hiring. But to keep like we have limited time. What is like looking back the expensive mistakes you made or things you learned the hard way? And if someone is starting now, they should keep this in mind to be a good salesperson in construction.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I learned the hard way was I underestimated influencers in the space. Construction is very collaborative, right? And if you don't show that you're trying to sell in a collaborative way, a lot of times you're not going to be able to move a deal forward. And I just had the same discussion with someone interviewing today. For just one project, you have a team for equipment, you have a team for modeling, you have a team for personnel, you have a team for basically everything. And it's not just a sole person's decision. That one person is going to ensure that what they choose to do doesn't greatly impact the entire team, right? And if you don't understand where your product could basically throw a curveball for other teams, you can spin your wheels going through a deal and then getting told no at the end and understanding why was it a no? We clearly showed you an ROI. We clearly went through the demo. We spent close to 3 months talking about this, and you send me an email that just says, no, we decided to go a different direction. And it's because your solution was going to affect a workflow for the modeling team, right? And if you never got sign off or buy-in from them, well, they're kind of that silent decision maker, right? Or that silent influencer that you never thought of. And a lot of times early on in my career, I lost a lot of deals because I wasn't multi-threading through an organization or multi-threading through an actual project. And I was leaving out so many other important pieces that I would get so many just cold responses of, no, we're not moving forward. And I'd be like, what did I do wrong here? And that's understanding construction, right? And I think the one thing that I've always harped with my team is, hey, when you're on a call, and that first initial call, even if it's a discovery call and you're moving forward through validating and then presentation, you need to be asking who else needs to be involved in our next discussion in order to move forward. 9 times out of 10, someone's going to say, oh, it's me. And then you have to push back and say, all right, okay, so you're the end all say all. That means you're doing everything related to this project. Or do we also need to speak and get the blessing of your ops team or your survey team or your BIM department? And then they start to think, wait, yeah, I should probably let them know what I'm about to do, right? I mean, it's like, great, can we agree to get those people on the next call here? It'll be 10, 15 minutes, just get them caught up to speed with what we're talking about and kind of let them have a chance to ask if they have any questions or concerns. Because I can already think of a few that they may have, but I want to make sure I'm not assuming here. I want them to come to me and tell me what they think or why they think this may not work for them. And as soon as I learned that, it basically opened up the gates. But I think I spent my first 6 months in the construction space just losing deals left and right, and not really understanding why. And it took a while for me to catch on that there was a lot of other players here that may not seem like big players, but they do have some type of say.
I learned so much about construction sales and so many insights. Thanks a lot, David, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.